This is the Cal 101 podcast on Cape Atlantic Live. Here's your host, Nick Kosko.
What's going on, everybody? It's the Cal 101 podcast right here on Cape Atlantic Live, presented by Ulmer's Appliance Service. I'm your host, Nick Kosko, and with me today is Lower Cape May head coach Ryan Slaney. Coach, thanks for joining me. The baseball season is underway. You guys just got back from Florida, got a season opening win, 10-0 over Conrad Academy, but now you're ready for some in-state and, of course, Cape Atlantic competition this week. On Friday and Saturday, a hopeful home and home against ACIT amid all of this rain. But appreciate you joining me. How is the preparation from the off-season spring training leading into that season opening trip down into Florida?
It's been great. We had a lot of guys playing multiple sports for the school this year, involved in winter season sports at Lower Cape May. But for those who weren't involved in our winter programs, we're hitting the weight room hard, doing their training with people off-site, getting ready for the season this year. As we got some big goals to achieve going into this year following last year's successful season.
Yeah, you guys made it to the South Jersey Group 2 quarterfinals in 2023. So, again, a projected playoff contender once again in 2024. You're one of the more talked about teams in this conference for this spring, one of the favorites, so to speak. I'm not sure. I mean, again, I know a lot of coaches and players say, yeah, we look at that, but we don't look at that. But I got to imagine with the expectations this year, as you just laid out right there, 2024 could be setting up to be something special for you guys.
Yeah, indeed. I mean, a lot of people know we have a lot of our returning starters. We only lost a couple key guys last year. One was the leading captain, senior Kyle Sack, who graduated. But a lot of returning starters, some of them 4-year starters and 3-year starters for the program. And yeah, I mean, like we talked about the other day, leading down to our trip in Florida, we got a bullseye on our back, and we got the spotlight on us, and it's our job to live up to those expectations that people have in store for us.
When you talk about a small program like yourselves, again, when I say small program, again, it just goes by the enrollment size, of course. So you generally, the small schools are like, okay, we usually don't have this type of spotlight on us. We don't have this target on our backs, particularly in a conference like this where you have a bunch of Group 3 and Group 4 schools, and obviously with other sports, Group 5 schools in the Cape Atlantic League. What does that mean for you guys? And I guess in turn, do you like having the spotlight on it? I think most people would say, well, we're not going to worry about that. But what's that been like for your team over the past calendar year?
I've been, as an alumni of Lower, I tell the guys, listen, when I graduated in 2002, and Lower was double the size it is now. And we were contenders back then, but we've had contending teams throughout the years since I've graduated. And I tell the guys, we're thin but mighty. Anybody that's ever asked about our program over the last few years, I've been saying the same thing. And even going into this year, we're sadly an injury or two away from having a very detrimental effect on the program. So just as we did last year, we scrapped it together there with the end of the season success, having 9-10 healthy guys. We got 11-12 ball players this year in our program. For the first time in quite a few years, we have a solid underclass coming into the program, especially coming to our middle school, where the future looks bright in terms of numbers. But at the end of the day, numbers are always thin, especially with the declining population that you mentioned. So that makes it more difficult, but also that underdog mentality, which I love and the kids love, because people kind of count us out. Being a smaller school and less kids being involved in the school as a whole. And even, our school, as being small as it is, we still have multiple programs available for our student athletes. So while other schools may be eliminating program, we're not, which makes it more difficult to have a successful program when you have multiple male sports being offered to the students in the spring.
When you look at the experience you brought back, you just mentioned how the numbers have been greater than they have been in years past. I got to imagine that only gives you a little bit more, I guess, peace of mind, knowing that I know you just said one injury could really derail the team's progress, but with a little bit more depth this year, where does that come from? And was that a job from your youth programs? Is that just you going out and basically just scouting the area, within the public school sense? Or where does that come from to kind of get the participation numbers up, especially for a good team like yours?
So ironically, I have 2 younger sons in our community that are also ball players coming up, one of which is in our middle school program for the first year this year. My other one is going into 5th grade. So years ago, our local Little League had asked me to kind of have more of an influence, which I jumped at the opportunity and seized that because I thought it was important to get the name out there, get the Caper Tigers mentality, the passion for the sport, try to reinvigorate that spark that used to be in Lower Cape May for baseball. because it is a sport that, and it's a national issue, not just a local one as well, where it's hard to keep people bought in. So the more and more that the younger kids have seen my face, and I'm always constantly like giving them free swag as they love to wear the Tiger logo and LC Marv Caper baseball apparel that we throw at them. It's a matter of just trying to keep them interested in the game and keeping it fun. And now I have kids for the first time that are coming through the program in our middle school, high school, aside from my own, I mentioned my two sons that I've coached. So not only is it the numbers bright for the future, but I'm excited for the future because these are ball players that some of which I've coached since they were in T-ball. So I'm excited for that. And I think that's smart, for any coach who's trying to build a successful program, is to not just look in-house, but as you mentioned, in the community, kind of recruiting and building that rapport with the kids. And so they look, to the future, and they're excited to play for you someday.
When you look at the kids that you coached when they were little, you just mentioned as far back as T-ball. So when you see their development through the youth programs, the middle school, and eventually under your watch at the high school, what kind of fulfillment does that give you as a head coach, knowing that you have a very good team now, and it just seems like their success is almost more worthwhile because you've seen them from, maybe even 10 years ago or even longer ago?
Yeah, I mean, the current class that we have right now are under the, the coaches that they've had prior to them. I wasn't involved in them at that age, but it just makes it that much more worth it. This time of the year, I literally, if I showed you my calendar, I have a double practice every night of the week, Monday through Saturday. So the unhealthy amounts of caffeine that I consume to get through this spring season, it makes it all worthwhile because the kids, are excited to come out. For the first time ever, as my tenure as head coach, we had to have tryouts in our middle school program, which was awesome. We had so many kids come out, and the unfortunate, with local schools cutting their middle school programs, we weren't able to have a double squad like you did years ago when I was a student at the middle school. So that's exciting for the future to know that there's that many kids coming out who are not just ball players, to the point where my middle school coach is, faced with that tough decision to actually make cuts and make a solid ball club. So it's exciting.
I love how you say you just consume too much caffeine, because I feel like as a person who is a broadcaster and, of course, a writer, I do this every single day. It's at least 2 cups in the morning, and then maybe I'll consider a third or fourth later in the day. So speaking of coffee, and you just mentioned the schedule coming up for you guys, ACIT, you're supposed to have a game against them on Thursday, but that got pushed back. And now you have a home and home on Friday and Saturday. Home on Friday, away on Saturday. Based at least, weather permitting, of course. What how do you guys stay alert as a team, and what do you do in the events of weather like this? I know this. I don't want to say it happens every year, but a lot of teams, especially up in the Northeast, have to deal with the rain, the wind, just bad field conditions. I mean, snow for all we know sometimes.
Yeah.
But what's that like for your team? Do you get indoor work in? Do you watch film? I mean, how do you guys operate when you really even can't take the field physically in preparation for a game this weekend?
Well, I will say we're fortunate enough at Lower since 2017, we have an indoor field house facility on site at campus there. So we definitely take advantage. We were in there today for our practice. So we definitely take advantage of that and use that to the fullest extent that we possibly can. So getting that work in despite the weather is obviously huge. You don't want to give anybody days off. We obviously, at our school, we also have an in-house weightlifting program under the direction of one of our former coaches, Matt Danzy. And it's great. So like during the kids' gym classes, they're able to hit the weights. It's not just an after-school program. So that's huge for our guys. So there really is never, as you mentioned, a day off. Like as you said earlier, we just got back from Florida. We had yesterday afternoon off because we got in on our morning flight, and we were back at it today. Honestly, it's easy to do when you have the leadership that I have in my program right now, with a lot of returning starters and the upper class heavy load within the program. Like the captains had a weightlifting session on their own this morning. That's huge. So when you have guys that are buying in, it makes your job that much easier to facilitate them and getting them the knowledge and the work, as you mentioned, they need to prepare for their opening games.
Let's talk about some of the guys that are experienced in your program. Looking at the box score yesterday, Hunter Ray had a great day at the plate. Evan Schaffler, a good day as well on the mound. Just talk about those two guys and maybe some other guys that I might have glossed over there that have really established themselves as leaders and just core guys for your program here in 2024.
Yeah, Evan Schaffler, as you mentioned, he's a 4-year starter. He's a returning captain. He's captaining along the side as well this year with other starters in our program. Hunter Ray as well, who's a 4-year starter. Both of those are going off to college and play next year. Evan's going to Shippensburg University, commit there, and Hunter going to FDU as well. So that's exciting for them. Also, alongside them, we have a fellow captain and also a 4-year starter, Cody Lewis. He's going to be our man behind the dish this year. Cody was a huge player for us last year, playing anywhere and everywhere we needed him. We used to joke around and call him Bugs Bunny. Even though I'm showing my age there with that skip, but the kids, he played everywhere. I think he played everywhere but right field for us last season because due to injuries and things that we needed for him to fill in. And he's also a 4-year starter. So aside from him, I mean, we have a lot of juniors and a couple other seniors as well that are returning. And, when you have, as I mentioned, the kids together at a young age, my assistant coaches who both have sons in the program, they've worked with these kids since they were in T-ball. So they are now living through what I'm looking forward to living through in the future when I see my sons coming through the program and their friends and their teammates that I've helped along the way. They're living through that right now. So all their hard work with these guys when they were little tykes out there, kicking the ball around and picking dandelions, it's all coming to fruition to them. So it's awesome. It's great to have not only experience, but mature experience. And we do that right now in the program.
What can you say about your staff? I talked to some other coaches where they have a mix of maybe what you have, which is a big-time veteran presence. Other coaches go a little bit younger, but they develop their staff in that way where it's like, okay, these guys just played for me about 5 years ago, and maybe they played college ball, maybe they played a little bit of college ball, and now are back, but they can develop as a assistant coach and eventually maybe relate to the younger players as well. What can you say about your veteran staff and what you make of going that route rather than maybe just a guy who immediately just graduated, now you put him on your staff?
Well, the irony is I haven't had the same assistant coach for 2 years in a row at my tenure as head coach. This is actually my first year that one of my returning assistant coaches is back for 2 years in a row. And they were all for good reasons. As you mentioned, they were former players of mine out of the program, and Mike Kimmerly, who was head coach here before me. So they were lower alumni, gentlemen who went on to get careers after their college career. So they all left on good terms. I would get them for a year or two, including my assistant coach last year, Justin Nicholas, who's an alumni of Lower. They all were great coaches, and definitely I can reflect back to when I was hired coming out of college, the new young kind of guy out of college, alumni of the program. The players definitely relate to them much more than the head, as you said, the veteran head coaches. And that's been something that's been hard for me to kind of adapt to, now turning 40 this year and being at the school for 17 years as a teacher and a coach. It's hard to, recognize that they don't always want to come talk to the head coach. And I have to remind myself of that dynamic with the players. But this year, ironically, with my staff that I have, I'm one of the younger ones. My other assistant coach, he's a first-year coach as well. He's an alumni of Woodstown. He got hired locally as a gym teacher in our elementary district, Steve McIntyre. So he's young. He's the guy that you mentioned earlier, and the kids are definitely relating to. He's going to be running our JV program this year. But it's been a revolving door, but as I mentioned, for all good reasons. So that makes my job that much more difficult each season as I'm trying to not only run the program, but also show a coach how to, jump into it and do what's the daily task and responsibilities of being a coach of a high school program. But it's been interesting to say the least. I tell everyone I'm wearing my ball cap, but I keep my head shaved so I don't show how many gray hairs are truly there.
I like that. It just seems like Lower K-May has a lot of positive irony, as you like to put it so far here in 2024. A couple more for you, Coach. I ask all these coaches around this area about their philosophies and how they operate their game management style, what they want to accomplish on the field in terms of strategy and whatnot. It varies program to program, but it seems like most coaches want to make sure they're well balanced. A lot of them want to focus on really strong pitching and maybe have timely hitting. What is your philosophy from an offensive and defensive standpoint? I mean, do you guys want to score a lot of runs and maybe pour it on some teams, or do you ultimately want to be that shutdown type of pitching type of team, especially as the season drags on?
It's great question. Going into this year, for the first time in quite a while, we actually have a really solid, healthy returning rotation as far as our pitching staff. There isn't a guy in the starting lineup from 1 to 12 that I don't feel comfortable throwing out on the mound. That they're all reliable. Obviously, some are more seasoned than others and have more pitching in their arsenal, and definitely some that are younger and less confident. But as far as their physical ability, I don't doubt anybody that we can put out there. It's nice to have that confidence in your pitching staff to know that anybody can go out there and take on anyone on any given day. Like our ace in the program, returning as mentioned earlier, Evan Schaffler. Last year, we were without him for a large majority of the season. And for anybody that was following us, he had 0 stats when it came to pitching. He had an arm strain in our last scrimmage against Buena in the spring, and then didn't pick up the ball until, probably 3/4 of the way through the year, and ended up being our shutout guy against some big schools late in the season. So, I mean, as far as that, we have, I hate to tip my hat, but we have quite a few offensive powerhouse guys in the lineup. Most programs may struggle from that 5 through 9 lineup issues, and we don't. We saw this week when we were down in Florida, we had guys that in the 1 through 4 that maybe had a bad approach, as you mentioned, or bad at bat, and then guys in the bottom half picked it up and pick up their end of the bargain in terms of responsibility and picking up the team and getting some runs across this year. So I wouldn't say we have any holes. My biggest thing that I would say with our guys, and it was kind of how we left Florida, was just confidence. I try to remind the guys that this is a game of failure. You're not going to always succeed. You're not always going to make the best throw, the best play, the best pitch, the best hit, but timely playing. You mentioned timely hitting, just being timely, doing the right things at the right time. If you have that approach, both on the offensive and defensive side, I tell my guys, you'll come out on top more times than you won't. And it's hard because as a former player, I was a catcher, so it was easy to kind of be running the ship from behind the dish. And a lot of these guys don't have that same mentality if they've never caught before, but you have to remind them it's okay to mess up. It's important to learn from those mistakes. I think to answer your question, really, we could be any team any day. We could be a team that can go out and win 1-0 with our ace on the mound and go out the next day and maybe not have our best arm on the mound, but win 10-0. It really is just a matter of the confidence in the kids in the program.
Well, I could definitely relate on one level. I was a former catcher, and I will just leave it at that. That was pretty much it. And then we hung up the baseball cleats and put the bat back in the garage. So Lower Cape May head coach Ryan Slaney with me here on Cal 101. I'll leave you here with this one, Coach. Lower Cape May, again, pegged by a lot of outlets as one of the teams to watch this year in the Cape Atlantic League, one of the teams to watch in South Jersey Group 2, to make a longer playoff run here in 2024, possibly win a South Jersey title and compete for that state title. What do you guys have to do by the time June rolls around?
Honestly, and this is what I've been saying to the boys since day one, take care of yourselves. If we remain healthy, I think there's no problem we can't do and check all those boxes that you just mentioned. Every year we set individual and team goals, which my assistant coach, Todd Schaffler, is all big on, with reminding the kids of their goals and reminding the kids of their team goals. If we can stay healthy, I think they have the ability to do everything that you just mentioned. Last year with the couple hiccups we had going into the playoffs were due to injuries. So if they can do that and they can buy in, I don't think that there'll be any reason why we can't go further than we did last year, do better than we did last year. And I think keep surprising people, which we did at the start of last year. I mean, if you took a look at our first game last year against Holy Spirit, nobody thought in a million years we had a chance in that game. And we were fired up on game one. And that was a great way to kick off our 2023 year. So we're hoping to do the same thing this year. Our last game down in Florida was awesome. We played lights out from offense to defense. There wasn't a hole in the game for us. We just hope that we keep that positivity back here in Jersey, although we could use some improvement in the weather.
Yeah, hopefully that sun does break by the time you guys play ACIT this weekend. Coach, appreciate your time. Good luck this season. Looking forward to seeing what you guys can do in the Cape Atlantic League and, of course, making a playoff run here in 2024. Appreciate you, man.
Thank you, sir. You have a good one.